This is Alicia with the Pigeon Letters design team with a new tutorial for you, and I'm really excited about this one. Today we are combining lettering and drawing some florals and kind of weaving them in together into one little colorful piece. So if you're interested, stay tuned. The supplies we need for this project are really minimal. You need a tablet, you need a drawing program on that tablet, and you're going to need a writing utensil. So I'm personally using my iPad Pro with the program Procreate, and I'm using my Apple Pencil with this little pink grippy thing that just makes my life so much easier when I'm trying to hold the pencil and draw. So additionally, if you have Procreate, you have the benefit of being able to access some fun Procreate brushes from the Pigeon Letters. They're available for purchase on Peggy's website, and I'm going to use brushes from 3 of the different packs just to kind of give a little variety here, but by all means you can switch it up and just use one. So the first thing I'm using are the Pigeon Grids lettering brushes. They're actually stamp brushes, and they're little templates that help you lay out and actually write your lettering. So they're gridded so you can get an idea of where you want your baselines and keep everything nice and even, and you just stamp them onto your page, which you'll see, resize them, and then on a new layer you can do your lettering on top. So I use these quite a bit. I think that they're really helpful for keeping my lettering look kind of nice and professional. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm using the pencil brush from the Vintage Texture Kit. I use this brush set quite a bit. I don't actually do a ton of texture in my work, but when I do, I reach for this set because I find that the textures are subtle enough, and they add a little bit of fun to my work when I do decide to add texture. So I'm just pulling the pencil from this, and I'm using one of the textures at the very end for a little addition to the background. I'm using the dusting brush, I think. So that is a fun set to use. I get a lot of use out of this one. This project is the drawing and writing ink brush set. This was actually the first one that I bought from Peggy, and I use this one quite a lot too for my inking. And anything I want to do with fine lines as well, this is a great brush set for that. So the one I'm pulling from this is actually the monoline brush. It's a great monoline pen, kind of mimics like a micron type of pen. So those are the brushes I'm going to use for this, but you can use obviously whatever you like. The last thing you might want to have for this project is some sort of photo reference to draw your flowers. The idea here is to keep them very doodly, very minimal, very simple, so you might not want to have a reference, you might just be able to do it from your head. But it's also not a bad idea to just have some sort of reference books open or a website with royalty-free photos like unsplash.com, pull up some flowers and just say, how can I make this the simplest version of this flower possible? How can I take a ranunculus and make it really, really simple, like a doodle? How can I take a daisy and make it a little doodle? Or you can just go ahead and make up flowers as you go, which is also really fun. But it's not a bad idea to have a little reference book on hand. I grabbed the ones that I have from a book sale at the library. They were really cheap, like $1, maybe 50 cents. They're really old books, but they have great photos in them for any time I want to draw a flower. So I highly recommend trying to add books like this to your collection when you want them. But if you don't have any books, like I said, using a website like Unsplash or Pexels or something that offers some royalty-free photos of flowers can be helpful just to spark your mind of like, how can I just draw a little flower so it's not all the same flower the entire way through. And that's about all you need, so it's time to just jump into this project. Alright, so we're going to open a new document. I'm doing an 8x10, but because it's horizontal I need to make it a 10x8. I'm keeping it 300 dpi, and that's giving us plenty of layers to work with, and then I'm using sRGB color space. So the first thing I have to do is navigate towards my brushes, and I'm going to go through the Pigeon Grids brushes, and I'm taking the brick, and this is going to be my main word on the bottom. So I stamp it down, I adjust the size that I want, and then I go back and I'm taking, personally I'm going with the rainbow because I want a little arch in the top lettering here. You can lay out whatever you want with your grid, but once you stamp them down, I like to do them on separate layers so you can see that I am erasing part of the rainbow that overlapped on the brick grid, and that just keeps things a lot easier for me. So each stamp you do, you can do it on a separate layer, adjust them as you need to separately, and then once you have it laid out the way you want, flatten everything up into one layer, reduce that opacity, and now pick your pencil brush. So I've gone with the Pigeon pencil from the Vintage Texture Brushes set, and I'm doing it in this teal color. You can choose whatever color you want, but this for me is sort of like my bones. I'm laying down the bones of my lettering here, so this is kind of messy. This is just to get a layout down. So adjust it, resize it. This layer doesn't really matter in the end, so do whatever you need to with it. Once you feel like it's sort of, the bones are in place, as you can see I've named it letter bones, go ahead and flatten that, reduce the opacity, and this is where we're going to go in and we're going to take the same pencil brush, but I'm doing it in black so I can see it a lot better. And this is where I'm going to actually start drawing out the lettering style that I want. So you can go with just solid block lettering, you could do bubble lettering, you could do some calligraphy hand lettering here if you want. That base layer is just meant to help you with the placement and the sizing of your letters. And so what I end up doing when I do this kind of like lettering, I'm hand lettering something, what I end up doing is I'll do this several times over. So I'm laying this down now, and it's going to be kind of messy. The eye is not straight. You can see that. I've already can see that I want the part of that end to be a little bit wider. The E actually looks really nice. And you'll see here when I'm trying to create this, bubble kind of script here, it's the sizing of everything is very messy. So this I will end up needing to redo again, but however many times you need to get your lettering to look the way you want it, go for it. So I'm just making the adjustments here. I put the grids back on, making sure everything's centered, and you'll see me making a clipping mask because anytime that I have a layer underneath, I want it to be a different color so I know it's not my final version, and then I'm reducing the opacity. So now on a new layer, I'm going right back over this, and I'm trying to like solidify the way I want the letters to look. So I'm smoothing out any curves, I'm, thickening up things, making those adjustments. And I could do this as many times as I want to, but I do think this was, only two times was enough for me here. So I'm able to now go in and kind of resize things, thin out that part of the end, but then thicken up that one, add the curves in the way I like. And as I do this, I try to make my sketch layers as close to the final as I want them, so that when I go back and I'm doing the final inking layer, it's good to go. I don't have to think about it too hard. The inking can be a little bit more relaxing because I don't have to think. It's just all done out for me. I'm not making adjustments. But other people do it totally differently. Some people like to do a really, really rough sketch. They might just, do the letter bones layer and then go in and do a final inking without even, adjusting from there. So it's personal preference, but I find that for me this works well to like make the sketch look exactly as I want it before I even attempt to do some inking. So this is just me going back over that first lettering sketch and just refining it even more. And do this as many times as you need to until you get it looking the way that you want. All right, now I think my lettering layer looks really great. I'm really happy with this sketch, so I've renamed that layer. And so now on a new layer, everything is on a new layer in Procreate. In a new layer, I'm taking that teal color again to indicate this is just my initial like doodle layer. I'm starting to just sketch out florals because what I want for this final image is to look like flowers are kind of growing out and through the words. but purposely I'm keeping this very doodly, very minimal, not a ton of detail. I don't want everything to look realistic, but I do think it's helpful to take reference images of flowers, maybe to give you an idea so you can look at a real flower and say, how can I make this the most simple version of that flower possible? This is supposed to be a ranunculus. How can I make a ranunculus look extremely simple? If I were to try to draw one with more detail, that's great. That's fine for another project. But for something like this, I just want it to be really simple, very illustrative, not a lot of detail. And that just sort of adds to the fun of this as well. So for now, I'm just going around and I'm doodling here. Things are going to overlap. You know, I'm not paying too much attention to all that. I just want to get it laid out the way that I want it to look and add the little, you know, flower blooms and leaves and things the way that I want them. And I'll go back in the next layer and worry about trying to, you know, work on those overlapping lines and stuff. But for now, just lay everything down the way that you want. Nice little doodles. And my advice is just keep it simple. You know, the draw of this kind of piece is that you're taking florals and you're mixing them in with lettering. You don't need either thing to be super detailed because it's all going to look really nice when it's all paired together. So just go through and, you know, keep in mind also as you're doodling this, you do want some things to eventually overlap on your letters. So keep that in mind as you're laying everything out. You know, move things around a little bit. You might want a leaf to pop out on a letter, but maybe not cover it up so much. And it might take some trial and error. This is obviously a very sped up version of what I was actually drawing at the time. I was going really slowly, believe it or not. So I did actually take a little bit of time between each thing and decided, okay, what flower do I want? As I'm looking at florals on in my books and on online on royalty-free websites, just taking a look at a flower and saying, okay, can I put this in here somehow? Or I was actually trying to go around in an order and make things fit together. So I was sort of like going through, then scrolling, finding a flower. How can I simplify this type of flower? Can I pop it in? And I also knew for balance that, like, I had those two daisies kind of popping out the top. I wanted a daisy to pop out the bottom as well to balance it. And I wanted to vary the sizes. So I wanted to have some larger flowers, but some little tiny berries and leaves and small flowers mixed in here to give a nice balance. I also had, you know, two ranunculus on the top. I wanted to have one on the bottom. And, you know, some florals are kind of facing the side and some are facing forward. So yeah, I mixed it up. Once I felt that it looked good, I just named it Floral Doodles. It is teal. Again, this was my sketch layer. So I'm now going back in, lowering the opacity just like I did with lettering on a new layer. I'm keeping the pencil brush, the exact same one, but I'm using black this time. And now I'm going to go in and refine those little doodles. I'm still keeping them really simple. You can see that I'm almost literally tracing over exactly what I did, just refining those lines a little bit more. And the difference in this step is that I am trying to take the time to erase those bits that are overlapping where I don't want them to be on top of the letter. So again, this is really sped up, but I am actually taking the time as I redraw each floral here. I'm trying to decide, do I want this piece to be on top of the letter or do I want the letter to be on top? And so if I want it to be below and I want the letter to be on top, I'm making sure that I just erase those lines just to make the sketch look a little less chaotic for me, and so that when I go through and I'm inking, I have a good idea. So right here, I knew that I needed to erase a lot of those petals from the U there, but I did want some to stay on top because I want it to look like that branch was weaving in through the letter. So that's something you can also adjust as you're inking. If you decide you don't like it on top, that's fine. It's just a little bit of erasing that we do, which you'll see when we get to that part. But for now, it's just refining the sketch, making it look exactly the way I want. So when I go to ink, I'm not confused. I don't have too much going on, and just making sure to erase those bits. And the key here is also reducing the opacity not only of your floral doodles, but of your lettering piece. So that way everything is kind of lower opacity. I can see what I'm doing. I can make a little sense of what's happening here. So you'll see I didn't erase any part of that flower I just drew. Part of it is overlapping on the Y, and that's because I do want that to stay on top, whereas these leaves here on the H, I wanted those to go under. So again, personal preference, take it nice and slow. I really did do this a lot slower than it looks here because you don't want to sit for, I think, an hour or more and watch me as I do this in real time. That's a lot, but pause this video as needed if you want to go step by step for sure. But yeah, it's just taking those doodles, refining them, and again, do this as many times as you need to. Don't feel like you will have to do one doodle layer and one final layer and you're good to go. Like, you might want to refine more, move things around, resize them, and then redo that sketch to make sure that it doesn't look super chaotic and confusing for your inking time. Okay, so it is now time to ink. You can see that we have everything laid out here. I'm keeping them still in separate layers, but I've just gone in and reduced the opacity. Now I'm just testing out the inking brushes, trying to decide which one I want to do, and I ended up with the monoline brush from the inking set, as you can see there. I've changed the color of my background because as I'm inking, I like to work in color. Some people like to just do like black and white or just keep it very simple colors and not change anything along the way, but I kind of like to try and work in the colors that I envision things to be in the final version. It's just more fun for me. So with the inking, I'm starting with the lettering. You could start with the florals if you want, but for me, I found it a little bit easier to start with the letters. I'm just taking it super slow, making sure that all of those curves are nice and smooth. There is a way in Procreate where you can kind of like draw a straight line and you hold your brush there for a second and it snaps to an actual straight line, and it also works for curves. You can draw a certain curve, hold the brush there for a sec, it'll snap into a nice smooth curve. That's great for some projects that I'm doing, but for something like this, I want it to really keep that hand lettering look. So I'm just sort of like taking it slow and drawing those lines as smoothly as I can, but also knowing that they're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Like, if I wanted it perfect, I would just put a font on here, and so that's not the point of this project. So I could snap those straight edges to be a perfectly straight line. I just don't want that. I want it to be as straight as I can get it by hand without you know, manipulating it a little bit. But if that's the look you like, if you like really harsh, like not harsh, sharp edges, sharp lines, perfect curves, that is a style, and that's a perfectly valid style. Go for it. But my personal style is I want to keep a little bit of that hand-drawn vibe here. So yeah, I'm just outlining all my letters, going back, and I'm gonna fill those in, and then I'll move on to a new layer to work on the florals. So now it's time to ink the florals. I am turning the lettering layer off to do this, and I'm going to add a new layer. And so for me, each color is getting its own layer. So as I go through all of these florals, I'm doing one layer for this bright green, I'm going to do one layer for a light pink, one layer for a dark pink. You can do it totally differently. You can do one layer for all the stems, no matter what color they are, one layer for all the blooms, however you need to do it. But I like to utilize, I think this size project gave us 89 layers to work with. Use them up, put everything on a different layer. It makes it a little more non-destructive, so if you have to go back and erase something, you're not messing something else up. So this is me just adding all the stems in with this brighter green color. Frustratingly, somehow the recording did not work for me drawing all of the floral blooms in, but you can see here I'm doing the same process. I'm literally just adding a new layer and then drawing the daisies, the florals, and then I'm drawing a new layer to add in the details on top, and a new layer to add the little leaves in. So this part for inking is literally just following the sketch as best I can and adding all the colors in. So once you've finished inking all of your things, this is the part where we get a little magical. Take your lettering, duplicate it, and you're going to drag one of the layers of lettering up to the top. So you have a sandwich. You have one lettering layer, all of your florals, and then the bottom lettering layer. Turn off the bottom lettering layer for right now. Leave the top one on. Just reduce that opacity enough so that you can see the florals. So what you're doing with this top layer is you're going to erase any bits where you want the flower to actually go on top of the lettering. So you don't actually have to be as precise as I am here, because it took me a second to realize, duh, the whole point of the bottom lettering layer is that it's going to fill in anything that you erase from the top that is showing through that the flower is not covering. So I just wanted to see an example there. That's what I'm doing, but I'm going back to reducing that layer and continuing to erase. So I'm just going along each letter or each part of the word and deciding, this floral that is overlapping with it, do I want it to be on top or bottom? This is not an important part of the letter H. It's still going to be very readable, so I'm letting that little pink flower rest on top. Same thing with that little bit here and there. Little bits are really easy, but I don't want to erase something large, which maybe we'll see in a moment after I erase these little florals. Because again, the Y, you can tell that this is a Y, so this flower can sit on top pretty easily without, you know, ruining the legibility of these words. We're going to go here and see the pink flower that's going to cover the top of the S. That's covering a little too much, so I'm leaving that behind. I was really unsure about those leaves there, so I let them go for a second. Here I definitely wanted to have some of these leaves from this plant to rest on top, so I was trying to find the smallest ones that weren't obscuring too much of the letter, and giving that a whirl. The upside is if I decided later I didn't like this, I could do some copying, pasting of that back in and put that back on top if I wanted, but it ended up working out. So again, that's the idea of having multiple layers here to work with. It's non-destructive. So yep, I just decided I wanted this leaf to come out so it looked like this branch of greenery was sort of weaving through the letters. And this was me trying to test that out as well. So I turned that bottom layer on and it filled that white in that I erased. And I thought that looked really good. I was happy with this. So go ahead and you're just gonna erase anything from that top layer that you want the flowers to see. Anything that you want to rest behind, don't touch it. And now I've just grouped everything together to make it look nice and even, but this is basically the way that the print is gonna look. And the last thing I'm doing here is I'm going into that vintage brush set, the vintage texture, and I'm taking one and I've just added a layer on top of my background to add a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of texture there for fun. I don't go heavy on my texture, but I always like to add a little bit, like paint splashes or something. So I used the dusting brush to do that in some white. And yeah, I think that was basically it. I was really happy with the way this turned out, and I don't think it's too difficult to do. This is just me adjusting my white to be a little off-white so it wasn't so harshly bright. But make sure if you change the lettering color on top, also change the one on the bottom so it looks even. So there you go, that is the finished little lettering project. I hope you had so much fun creating this. The possibilities are endless. You can make greeting cards, prints, anything. So if you make this project, be sure to tag me and the pigeon letters. See ya!